He thought he was untouchable. Smart, fearless, and just reckless enough to get by. Until one careless word changed everything. Ethan, a bold young man with nothing to lose, walked into a nightclub that would test him like never before. In the shadows stood Don Sal, the Mafia boss whose name alone could make men disappear, whose anger toppled empires, and whose gaze could freeze a room. Ethan made a joke. A sharp comment meant to impress his friends, but it backfired. The room went silent. Every laugh died mid-air. Every shadow seemed to grow darker. And in that moment, Ethan realized he had made a mistake he might never recover from. What would Don Sal do? Could Ethan survive the storm he just unleashed? Or would arrogance finally meet its price? Hit like, share this story, and subscribe if you want to witness a tale of power, pride, and consequences like nothing you've ever seen. Ethan had always thought he was untouchable. Smart, fearless, a little reckless, and a little cocky. Growing up in the city's rougher neighborhoods, he'd learned to talk fast, think faster, and push boundaries. But nothing in his life had prepared him for this night. The nightclub was dark, the kind of place where whispers carried secrets, and every shadow seemed alive. Ethan leaned back, laughing with his friends, confident in his charm and daring, unaware of how close he was to crossing a line that should never be crossed. Then Don Sal walked in, and the air changed. The music seemed to lower itself. Conversations stalled mid-sentence, and even the security guards instinctively straightened. Don Sal, the man whose name alone could make grown men sweat, whose orders toppled rivals, and whose reputation was carved from fear and respect, was now standing in the same room as Ethan. Ethan, in his arrogance, did what he thought was clever. A joke, a smirk, a sharp comment that was meant to impress his friends. But as soon as the words left his mouth, the laughter died. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Don Sal's gaze locked onto Ethan, slow, deliberate, and merciless. Every step Don Sal took toward him felt like thunder in Ethan's chest. The weight of every story Ethan had ever heard about men disappearing, families ruined, and careers destroyed, flashed before his eyes. Panic and adrenaline collided in his veins. His friends froze, unsure whether to laugh it off or flee. Ethan's heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. The shadows seemed to stretch, reaching for him. The music, the chatter, the light, all of it faded. There was only Don Sal and Ethan's reckless mistake. For a moment, Ethan considered running, darting past the guards, out the door, anywhere. But the instinct to survive clashed with pride, and he stayed, frozen and daring. Don Sal stopped just a few feet away, silent, his presence dominating the entire room. Then slowly, deliberately, he spoke. His voice was calm, almost measured, but it carried the weight of an empire. Every syllable felt like a verdict being delivered. Ethan's stomach turned. Could this arrogant teen talk his way out, beg for mercy, or was it already too late? And then the impossible happened. Don Sal raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest. Or was it amusement? Crossing his otherwise impenetrable expression. For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed suspended, holding its breath. This was more than a simple insult. This was a test of survival, of courage, of instinct. And Ethan would soon learn that one careless word could ignite a chain of events that no one, least of all him, could control. Stay tuned, because what happens next will shock you, challenge everything you think about power and pride, and leave you wondering, how far can arrogance go before it destroys you? Hit like, share this story, and subscribe if you want to follow Ethan's daring gamble with fate, power, and the most dangerous man in the city. Ethan had always lived on the edge. In a city where power was measured in fear and respect, he had learned to survive by being clever, bold, and sometimes reckless. By day, he was just another face in a crowd, street smart, quick with a joke, and impossible to ignore. By night, he sought thrills, testing boundaries and daring fate itself. That night, he and his friends had gathered at a downtown nightclub. Dim lights, bass-heavy music, and a crowd that thrived on risk. Ethan leaned back, sipping a drink, laughing louder than necessary, trying to impress his crew. Life was predictable, exhilarating, and dangerously fun. He didn't know that in the shadows, someone was watching, calculating, waiting. Don Sal. Even the name carried weight. Don Sal, boss of one of the most feared Mafia families in the city. A man whose word could crush businesses, destroy families, and ruin lives without leaving a trace. His reputation wasn't built on hearsay. It was real, deadly real. And tonight, he was walking straight into Ethan's world. Ethan didn't notice at first. His arrogance blinded him. Then the shift happened. The laughter around him faltered. Conversations dropped mid-word. Even the security guards straightened, subtle but unmistakable. The man himself entered the room. Don Sal, calm, collected, menacing without moving. Ethan's mind raced. He knew who this was, the stories, the legends, the whispered warnings, but in a moment of bravado, he did what he always did. He cracked a joke, a smart aleck comment aimed at showing off in front of his friends. Silence. The music seemed to die. His friends froze. Don Sal's eyes locked onto him, the coldest, most deliberate stare Ethan had ever felt. Every heartbeat, every shadow, every second stretched unbearably. He suddenly remembered every tale he had heard of men disappearing, families destroyed, and lives ruined, all because someone had angered Don Sal. And now, he was next. Don Sal's presence was overwhelming. He took slow, purposeful steps toward Ethan, each one echoing like a drumbeat marking an approaching storm. Ethan's mind raced. Apologize? Lie? Beg? But his pride, that reckless arrogance that had carried him through countless minor scrapes, refused to bow. You've got guts, Don Sal finally said, his voice smooth but cutting like a blade. Or maybe stupidity. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. The room felt smaller, the lights harsher, the shadows longer. Every friend around him stiffened, unsure whether to intervene or run. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in his throat. It wasn't just one careless insult anymore. It was a declaration. Ethan had challenged power, directly, openly, and foolishly. The tension escalated over the next few minutes. Don Sal circled him, watching his reactions, studying every twitch, every breath. Do you know who you're talking to? He asked, his tone casual but layered with menace. Ethan nodded barely. His pulse was deafening. Every instinct screamed for him to flee. But another instinct, a mix of pride, foolishness, and adrenaline, pushed him to stand his ground. You think words can scare me? Ethan blurted. Don Sal's eyes narrowed. A hint of a smirk crossed his face, but it was dangerous, unreadable. The smirk disappeared as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the weight of his presence. No, he said slowly, but words can get people killed. The nightclub, once a place of music and laughter, now felt like a battlefield. Every person in the room became a silent observer, holding their breath, waiting to see who would break first. Ethan's friends were frozen, unsure how to help. The security team tensed, but they knew better than to intervene. Then came the subtle testing. Don Sal asked Ethan questions, not directly threatening, but carefully chosen, each one probing his arrogance, each one measuring his limits. Ethan stumbled at first, but then, fueled by a mix of fear and adrenaline, he pushed back. He joked, he deflected, he taunted just enough to show he wasn't a coward, but not enough to provoke full-on wrath. Yet time slowed. Every second felt like a trap. Every movement could spark disaster. Ethan realized he had crossed a line he might never come back from. But the fire inside him, the reckless spark that made him Ethan, refused to be extinguished. Finally, Don Sal stopped, just inches away, leaning close enough that Ethan could feel his breath. You've got nerve, he whispered. And nerve can be dangerous. For you, Ethan's chest tightened. The crowd, sensing the climax of this silent showdown, leaned in. Every heartbeat thundered in his ears. He had survived the first wave, but the real test, the one that would decide whether he walked out alive or ended up as another whispered cautionary tale, was only beginning. And then, Don Sal smiled. But it wasn't a smile of approval. It was a calculated, dangerous smile, one that promised consequences, challenges, and a reckoning Ethan could not yet imagine. The storm had just begun. The air in the nightclub had changed. No music could mask it now. Every breath seemed heavy, every shadow menacing. Ethan stood frozen, adrenaline pounding, as Don Sal approached, his steps deliberate, measured, like a predator closing in on prey. "You've got guts," Don Sal said again, low and deliberate. "But guts can get you killed." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. Every story he'd heard about Don Sal, men disappearing, rivals crushed, families destroyed, flashed before his eyes. His friends stood frozen behind him, unsure whether to run, intervene, or pretend they didn't know him. The room felt smaller, the lights harsher, shadows stretching like fingers reaching for him. But Ethan refused to back down. Not now. Not after the arrogance that had led him here, not after the pride that had kept him alive this long. "I know exactly who you are," Ethan said, voice steadier than he felt. "And I know what I said was dumb, but I'm not scared of you." A faint smile flickered on Don Sal's face, calculated, dangerous, unreadable. The smirk disappeared instantly, replaced by that cold, intense gaze that had toppled kings. "You're brave. Or foolish. Time will tell which." Suddenly, Don Sal's hand moved, not in threat, but in command. Two of his men stepped forward, surrounding Ethan. Panic surged through the room. Ethan's pulse raced. Every instinct screamed to run, to escape, to vanish. But he stood his ground. "You think this is just about words?" Don Sal asked, voice barely above a whisper, but heavy with authority. "This is about respect, about knowing your place, and you've forgotten yours," Ethan's mind screamed. His friends were frozen. The crowd, those few brave enough to linger, watched in tense silence. The nightclub, once a playground of laughter and thrill, had become a battlefield. Don Sal circled him slowly, eyes like steel. Each step seemed to press into Ethan's chest. His men flanked him silent, unblinking. Ethan's palms were sweaty, heart hammering, mind racing through every possible escape, every plan, every lie that might save him. Then, the first strike came, but not physical. A challenge, sharp, cunning. "You have one chance," Don Sal said. "One moment to prove you're more than words. One move to show me whether you're alive, or just reckless." Ethan's chest heaved. The room seemed to contract around him. Every story, every whispered warning, every lesson in survival came flooding back. He had underestimated Don Sal, and the price for that mistake was becoming terrifyingly clear. And yet, a spark of defiance remained. Adrenaline and fear fused into clarity. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to hide. He had crossed the line, yes, but now he would own it. "You think you scare me?" Ethan said, voice strong despite the tremor in his hands. "I don't. You may have power, but I have something you can't touch. I've got my choices, my pride, and my fight." For the first time, the smirk on Don Sal's face widened, not cruel, but intrigued. The room held its breath. Ethan's friends, frozen moments ago, now leaned in, sensing a shift. This wasn't just bravado. This was survival. This was courage. Then came the moment that would decide everything. Don Sal stepped closer, his face inches from Ethan's, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. His men tensed. The crowd braced, and for one heartbeat, it seemed Ethan's world would shatter. But Ethan didn't flinch. Not an inch. Not a moment. And in that charged silence, something remarkable happened. Don Sal, the man who had crushed countless rivals without mercy, hesitated. His hand relaxed. His men froze. The room seemed suspended in time. Ethan had faced the storm, stared into the eyes of the most dangerous man in the city, and, against all odds, had survived. But the consequences were still uncertain. Don Sal's decision in the next moments would shape Ethan's life forever. And just as the tension reached its peak, the nightclub door swung open. The nightclub was quieter now, but the tension lingered like smoke in the air. Ethan's heart still pounded, every nerve still alive with adrenaline. He had faced Don Sal, stared into the eyes of the most feared man in the city, and survived. For the first time, he truly understood the weight of his choices. The danger of arrogance, and the price of pride. Don Sal's men lingered, watching. But their boss's gaze had softened, not in kindness, but in recognition. Ethan had courage, He had nerve. He had survived a moment where most would have crumbled. And in the Mafia world, that earned respect, the kind that couldn't be bought, negotiated, or demanded. Outside, the city seemed different. Ethan stepped into the cool night air, the neon lights reflecting in puddles on the asphalt. His friends crowded around, relief etched on their faces. You okay?" one whispered. Ethan just nodded, still catching his breath, still processing what had just happened. The days that followed were surreal. News of the nightclub incident leaked through the underground network. Some whispered in awe, some in fear, some in anger. Ethan's reputation changed overnight. No longer just the reckless kid who thought he was untouchable. He was now the one who had dared to insult and survive the most dangerous man in the city. But the victory was not without consequences. Ethan felt the weight of Don Sal's attention. Every step outside was measured, every conversation calculated. He had earned respect, yes, but he had also painted a target on himself. The lesson was clear. Courage could save you, but arrogance could also bring you to the edge of destruction. Yet, Ethan had changed. That night had burned away the reckless bravado that had defined him for years.
He had learned to balance boldness with strategy, pride with awareness, and freedom with respect.
The streets were still dangerous, but he now understood how to navigate the storm without being consumed by it. Don Sal, meanwhile, had his own acknowledgement of Ethan's spirit. In the Mafia world, respect is currency, and Ethan had just deposited a fortune of it. Their relationship, tense, cautious, and silently mutual, would define future encounters. Ethan had survived, yes, but he had also earned a place in Don Sal's calculations, and that alone would shape the choices of both men in the years to come. The incident also had ripple effects for Ethan's friends. They had seen firsthand the cost of arrogance, the stakes of defiance, and the power of courage. For some, it was a lesson in fear. For others, it was a lesson in loyalty and bravery. Ethan's world, once small and reckless, had grown broader, more dangerous, and more real, and yet through it all, one undeniable truth remained. Courage had the power to carve paths through fear, even when the odds seemed impossible. Ethan had faced one of the deadliest men in the city, stared into the abyss of Mafia power, and emerged alive, not just physically, but as someone stronger, smarter, and wiser. As the weeks passed, the memory of that night lingered. Ethan often found himself reflecting on every choice, every word, every twitch of expression that had kept him alive. The adrenaline faded, but the lessons remained. Pride could be deadly, fear could be instructive, and respect, earned or lost, was the only thing that truly mattered in a world ruled by power. In the end, Ethan's story became more than a tale of near death and audacity. It became a legend in the underground circles, a story whispered to teach respect, caution, and courage. And for Ethan, it was a personal revelation. Life was a gamble, but bravery and calculated risk could tilt fate in your favor. The moral was simple, yet profound. In a world of power, fear, and danger, courage could survive where arrogance alone could not. Respect must be earned, challenges must be faced, and sometimes, the most reckless act, the one that defies the most powerful man in the city, can teach lessons no classroom ever could. Ethan's eyes lifted to the city skyline, neon lights painting the horizon. He had survived, he had fought, he had learned, and he knew that while the streets would always be dangerous, he would never again underestimate the cost of a word, the weight of a stare, or the price of pride. Because in this city, with men like Don Sal, one misstep could mean death, but one act of courage could mean survival, respect, and the start of a new legacy. And that night, under the flickering streetlights, Ethan smiled, alive, aware, and ready for whatever came next.